Since the 19th century, historically black colleges and universities have been created to support, build character shaping and also leadership in African Americans in diaspora, and African universities also in supporting building human resource capacity. Now at this moment, we're looking forward to build that synergy between the diaspora and their wealth of experience, and also trying to build that kind of strength for African universities. The point is, where do we have that level ground to bring all these parties together to reshare the energy? And that is where AAU Talks brings you a great discussion with two great guests, one with me in the studio, one also joining virtually, on how we can enhance or expand to the first century role of HBCUs and African universities. My name is Ezrah Aharone. You're welcome to AAU Talks. Stay with us. We'll be back after the short break, and I'll let you know who they are. And as usual, zoom to discussion. Stay with us. Welcome back to AAU Talks on AAU TV, the voice of higher education in Africa. And we bring you to this very important discussion on how we can expand the 21st century role of historically black colleges and universities and their relevance with African universities. And with me to discuss this is Dr. Julius Garvey. He is the founder of the Garvey Institute. Doc, you're welcome to AAU Talks.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great.
As you're suggesting, it's of major importance that those of us in the diaspora, both in terms of the colleges and the intellectuals, as well as the ordinary people, shall we say,
Sure.
Join with the African continent
Sure.
at different levels.
Sure.
As you know, my father 100 years ago created an organization
Sure.
of the UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement Association, to do just that, to link all of us together, as he said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad.
Splendid.
Specifically in the area of higher education, we have the University of the West Indies. I'm originally from Jamaica, which is a major university in terms of the Caribbean region. We have several others in the Caribbean region. And of course, we have the historically black colleges in the United States, over 100. And I think, Professor Ezrah Aharone is out of, shall we say, Delaware State University.
Sure.
And he can deal specifically with the HBCUs
Sure.
and how we're going to bring the HBCUs together with the African universities.
Great. And also joining us is Professor Dr. Ezrah Aharone with Delaware State University. Doc, if you can hear us, please do welcome to the program today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Great. So we're going to have a very interactive discussion, basically trying to look into the essence of the HBCUs for us to appreciate the impact they bring on board, and also how African universities stand to gain from the expertise and the resource of the HBCUs and also all the aspirants. Let's start with the very first one with you, Professor Ezrah, basically about the HBCUs. We believe that the HBCUs have been a very core pillar to character building and also leadership in the diaspora for African Americans. Can you tell us more about the other amazing impact that HBCUs have made within the African American region, basically?
Thank you for that. The community of historically black colleges and universities that emanated from the 1860s represent an important part of black culture and the development of black intelligentsia. So everyone knows hip hop, everyone knows hip hop artists, Jay-Z, and people are familiar with black culture, black movies, but the historically black colleges and universities, which are the alma mater of a lot of the people that we know that drive culture today, is something that we want to familiarize Africa with. The rich history that exists between Africa and HBCUs is also something that people should take note of. Because if you look at HBCUs in number, we represent, I believe, less than 3% of the total universities in America, but yet we produce a large majority of Black professionals, whether it's the Congressional Black Caucus that we know of politically, or whether it's Black engineers and judges. We produce the majority. And it's not that that linkage does not extend into Africa. In Ghana, the first president of Ghana, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, was a graduate of Lincoln University, which is an HBCU. The first president of Nigeria, Nnamdi Azikiwe, graduate of both Lincoln University and Howard University, and both of them created courses and taught at HBCUs. And the first president of Malawi, Hastings Banda, HBCU graduate from Mahari Medical College. So we have this rich history that the Center for Global Africa and the Marcus Garvey Institute for Human Development, we're looking to build upon, not to create something new. We just have to remind ourselves of the origin of, how we evolved as intellectuals, in this cross-cultural way that's going to be very important as we move forward to implement things like Agenda 2063 and making the sixth region more practical and material in terms of participating in African development.
Great. So let me just add that Dr. Ezrah is representing the Center for Global Affairs Africa, and he is also with us with Delaware State University. Dr. Julius, the point is we're seeing a broader vision from the HBCUs. You've seen a great impact glaring ahead of you on how you can come into Africa and make an impact. From your own spectacle in the diaspora, what are the potentials that you see that you really feel that you should come down and make this impact?
Well, basically, the future of Africa depends on its young people. And its young people need to be educated. There's a terrible statistic out there that, 100 million young Africans are not in school. Now that's a shame in terms of Africa, but it's a shame for all of us as African people. And we have to do what we can to really make education universal. And, we have this a long history of education in the diaspora, again, in the Caribbean, in the United States, that we can link with you here on the continent, because Professor Ezrah alluded to it, that we are the sixth region. The African Union has recognized us as the sixth region, I think, since 2019. So it's important for us to make a contribution. And if we have this long history of education, we've turned out a great number of intellectuals, a great number of professionals in many, many different areas, from education to astronauts and astrophysics, et cetera, et cetera. Now we can bring that potential to bear on the development of the African continent, which of course is the richest continent, but has the poorest people. So something is wrong with that equation, so to speak. And what's wrong with that equation is the mindset that's needed to develop Africa. You need a mindset and you need a commitment. Those of us in the diaspora, hopefully we have the mindset, and definitely we're committed. We're very happy to be here in Ghana, where President Akufo-Addo in 2019 created the Year of Return. I came in 2019 with a number of people, hundreds of thousands, and people are coming and coming and coming. So the whole idea of Pan-Africanism, shall we say, is now very much current. I think Chance the Rapper was here with a Black Star concert and so on. So, the ordinary diaspora, as well as the intellectual, we're all coming back to Africa. So we need to do that then in a formalized way and create structures. And that's what we're really talking about here, the structure that we can create with the Association of African Universities, with the HBCUs, and with the University of the West Indies. So that's part of our mission. I was very happy to be here. I was invited by the African Exim Bank. They were celebrating their 30th anniversary. They're doing wonderful things. But we're also celebrating the 60th anniversary of Kwame Nkrumah and the AAU and his book, Africa Must Unite.
Great.
So that's why we're here. Africa must unite. Great. Africans must unite.
Sure.
And Kwame Nkrumah said, positive action.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yes, I wanted to ask if Dr. Ezra was here during the year of return. Doc, were you here?
No, I didn't make the year of return. To full disclosure, Ghana is a country that I'm very familiar with. I lived there in Ghana in the early 80s, so I know the old Ghana and I know the new transformative Ghana. And just like with Africa in general, these transformations are happening. And so to give it the kind of concrete underpinning that's necessary, where universities are creating the workforce development and the intellectual capital, human development capital, it's going to require us to combine our efforts, our programs in a unified front, to have a common approach for development, so that the ideas that we have on paper can be put into practice. And so the Center for Global Africa, in alignment with our partners here in the US, that includes the Marcus Garvey Institute for Human Development, we stand fully prepared to work with groups like AAU to bring that to fruition.
You know, before we can dive into this open discourse on the role of the CGA and also the Marcus Garvey Institute in ensuring that we create that connection, tell us what has been the milestone in telling the story of how the Center for Global Africa has made that impact, trying to bridge that gap between diaspora and also African universities. What has been the roadmap for you since your inception?
Well, one of the things that we've done is we have an evolving partnership with AAU, so we're looking to further cement that in the next coming weeks, months, to do that. But the Center for Global Africa, we're also in partnership with the African Peer Review Mechanism of the African Union, and we work with scholars and experts who are graduates of those very African universities that we seek to empower. So we are always involved with high-level engagement, people-to-people relations, and now we look through the channels of AAU to have more direct university-to-university engagement.
Great. We'll tell you more about some of these great initiatives and programs that are coming from the CGA and also the Marcus Garvey Institute, and how we can bring aboard African universities as a level ground, leveraging on their capacity and their growth. Stay with us. We'll have a short break. Yo, welcome back on AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. My name is Ajaman Otrodako. I'm joined by two amazing guests, and we're looking at the 21st century expanding to the 21st century role of historically Black colleges and universities, and also their relevance, and with African universities. And Dr. Julius, before we went for break, we were talking about the impact made by CGA. And Dr. Ezra, you can come in anytime you have a point you want to make, so we can keep the discourse more interactive. The point is, the challenges in Africa are very glaring. Technology, funding, human resource capacity. And these are undoubtedly the case. You've seen it, you've seen the figures. You mentioned about 1 million young people in Africa who are not going to school.
100 million.
100 million, actually. And I repeated it. We have more worse situation with women and children and all that. What is the solution that you were bringing on board?
Well, I'm not necessarily speaking for the whole diaspora, so we can, in some sense, speak conceptually, because we do understand the mood of the diaspora, and we do understand the resources of the diaspora. We've been in the Americas, we've been in Europe for hundreds of years since we were kidnapped.
Sure.
So we've had an opportunity to learn, shall we say, from the people who kidnapped us, and they kidnapped us in order to develop their resources. So we were part of the development of their resources, and their resource development owes a great part of it to us in terms of our inventiveness as well as our hard labor. So that over time, as we have discussed before, has manifested itself, for example, in the HBCUs and all of the different professionals that have come out of centers such as the HBCUs. And, then there are other areas in terms of the engineers, the people in finance, the people in business, and so on. Certainly African Americans have, a $1 trillion economy, basically, that can be mobilized in terms of resources that can be financial resources that can be applied to development in Africa. The investments need to be properly shaped and so on and de-risked. But the finance is there. The intellectual capacity is there. Sure. So it's a matter of working with the different institutions, and it's wonderful, to be here today with the AAU. As I mentioned, I was with the Exim Bank for the last few days, and the discussions were along similar lines. Yeah. So the Exim Bank is a wonderful, financial resource that's committed to the development of Africa, and is committed to the development of the diaspora as part of Africa. Whether you know it or not, the Exim Bank now has a branch in the Caribbean, centered in Barbados. It has committed $1.5 billion for development in the Caribbean. There's another $1.5 billion that is waiting so long as Jamaica and Trinidad come on board. So we're talking about $3 billion there in the diaspora for investment. And the investment that we're talking about is to link the diaspora, with the continent, both in terms of airspace, in terms of sea space, and in terms of that whole business of communication. My father back in the day, all he had was a newspaper and then the Black Star Line, but he was able to link 6 million people together, both in the diaspora and on the continent. So we have, so much more in terms of all of these technological abilities. Certainly everything here needs to be digitized. We have that sort of capacity that we can bring to bear because we've been in that space for a long period of time. So there's a lot that we can do to help the development of Africa. And we are here to try to link with the AAU, and we've been linking with the AAU, as Professor Ezra has mentioned, that the Center for Global Africa, has a mandate from the AAU. We're linking with the Exim Bank that I just mentioned, and we're having follow-up meetings with them and so on. So, the bridges are being built. And so I look to the future with, I'm very pleased with what I see for the future.
Actually, permit me to announce that Dr. Garvey is the son of the great Marcus Garvey, and he mentioned one of his achievements, the Black Star Line. How do you feel when you sit to read through his achievements, his ideals, and his acts? How do you feel?
Well, I always tell people that I chose my parents very well.
That's amazing.
So I'm very proud to be my father's son. Yes,
it's a privilege. I mean, it goes down in history that today we have the heir parents of Dr. Marcus Garvey here in our house. Dr. Ezra, can you hear us?
Yes.
Sure. So another dimension is how the HBCUs and also the African study centers in the US can also help enhance engagement with African universities. What is the goal with that union?
Well, the Center for Global Africa, we are housed at Delaware State University, but we are an HBCU consortium, meaning that we work with historically Black colleges and universities in general. So if you look at the specialties of those universities, the expertise of the professors, and all the programs that are offered to students, we bring the heft of that to offer to Africa in terms of working with APRM, the African Peer Review Mechanism, in a structural way, so that we can tap the best of what we do as HBCUs to share and as well learn from Africa and African universities and institutions. So the whole objective is working modeling global Africa is to harness, tap, and apply that human intellectual capital to be a part of Africa in ways that will contribute to Agenda 2063, as well as the development plans of individual nations. And so we look forward to collaborating further with AAU so that that systems approach that we already have in place can be strengthened and enhanced through the resource capabilities and intellectual capital that you bring to the table. So it's about a systems approach, creating two-way structural design so that resourcing and people and ideas, programs can flow freely in a way that is going to contribute to the AFCFTA, that's going to contribute to Agenda 2063, and that's going to equally have benefits in the diaspora so that our communities and our universities are involved in this in a mutually beneficial way.
Great. And talk of the AFCFTA, Dr. Garvey, what is the great potential you see with this great initiative, and how do you feel that there's something to be done? Is there anything to be done to enhance Africa, to hold on to this vision?
It's a wonderful vision to link 1.5 billion people together in an area of free trade. As I mentioned, the Exim Bank has been working significantly in this particular space in terms of the financial institutions, but so much has to be done. Certainly you will need one currency. You'll need one passport. You'll need one tax system. You need one language, maybe Swahili or whatever, or maybe two languages at most. You're going to need the proper roads, the proper railways. And the bottom line is two things. One, you cannot get the maximum benefit out of the conceptual idea of the African, free trade area, which supposedly is 3 trillion, a GDP of 3 trillion or 3.5 trillion. You cannot get the maximum benefit unless you have a common political approach. And what I'm talking about is federated states, because you have to have a decision-making body and to be able to conceptualize what is needed and then to carry out the actions. You can't have 54 different countries doing this willy-nilly and so on, because it will stretch out forever. And this is something that, Kwame Nkrumah brought to the table. 60 years ago. It's something that my father dreamed of 100 years ago. So there's a delay in that. The other thing that is needed, and again, seriously, is the human potential to really take care of this, because you need all of the digitization, you need all of the intellectual capital to be able to run all these different institutions and to do all the manufacturing that is going to be needed, whether it's in the automotive industry, it's agricultural area, post-harvesting, and so on and so forth. Tremendous job opportunities, etc. But if we don't educate our youth, then there'll be nobody there. We talk about the youth dividend, but we have to educate our youth, because without educating the youth, there'll be nobody there, and then we're going to have to depend on artificial intelligence, which I don't think we want to do that. So education is a must, and we get back to this whole business of linking the universities here, the AAU, with the HBCUs and the intellectual capital that we bring to the table, which is a must.
Great. Well said, Dr. Garvey, on how we can enhance our continent and also our human resource with education. Dr. Ezrah, you may want to give us some very last remarks on what to expect. Quick one.
Yeah, well, if we're going to succeed in Africa and the diaspora, as we're discussing here, then we have to do things differently. We have to do new things. And that is going to require new forms of thinking and ideas that are innovative, that will allow us to have the frameworks in place to make us successful. We can't continue to do the same things as in the past, business as usual. It has to be business as unusual to do these new things. And so when we look around, we have the potential, we have resources. It's just a matter of how we apply them. One of the things about a subject that I've written mostly about as a professor, the idea, the concept and consciousness of sovereignty, one of the ways in which it's measured when you're talking about sovereignty or sovereign intellect is the degree to which problems are solved, and the degree to which we become the beneficiaries of our own knowledge, of our own intellect, so that first and foremost, we are able to take what we know and apply it in ways that advances our best interests. And that's what's important. And I think these kinds of conversations are important, but they have to be implemented. And so the alignment that we have here today, just with our three institutions, can have great impact once we lay out the action steps and look at the ways and means to implement them in the best ways. Because one thing that we do have is a captive audience of students. The question becomes, what do we present to them? What do we have them to do? And in many ways, what we assign them to do, the way we carry out those instructions will be critical to the way that Africa will look in the future. So if we want to change the dynamics of what's happening in Africa and the diaspora, then it rests on us as decision makers and institutions to lead the way.
So you heard it yourself, wherever you're watching AAU Talks. Martin Luther King said it. Dr. Marcus Garvey saw it. Today, Dr. Garvey here has said it. Dr. Ezrah also said it. I mean, we're saying the same thing, that it's about time that we bridge the missing piece of the gap, the bridge line between the diaspora and also the African continent. They're part of our growth, and it's about time that we start the collaboration and then we grow together. We believe that you've had a great time on AAU Talks. Thank you so much, Dr. Garvey, for your time.
My pleasure.
Yes, well, Dr. Ezrah, thank you so much for your time, for joining us on AAU Talks to express the vision of a partnership between your CGA, the Garvey Institute, and also AAU, to try and then create that enabling environment for African universities and also our human resource capacity. So for you watching at home, thank you very much for your time as well. Keep watching AAU TV, AAU Talks, the voice of higher education in Africa. My name is Ajivan Ochredakom. Have a nice day, be safe, and bye.